Our next panel is all about delving into the future of new age EdTech businesses going offline. Chaitanya Kalipatnapu of Emeritus is going to moderate this fascinating session exploring the blend of digital and traditional education methods in today's learning environment. So please welcome Chaitanya and the founders of Scalar, upGrad, Masters Union, and Physics Wallah.
Afternoon post-lunch session is always a tough one in terms of ensuring that maybe the 100+ people in this room stay awake, but we'll do our best. So I think the panelists need no introduction, inspiring entrepreneurs and the companies that they run. So we'll get straight to the topic. So we have one exciting title, right? We have four inspiring entrepreneurs, 100+ audience, and just 35 minutes at our disposal. So maybe let's get cracking.
Chaitanya, 5.
Sorry?
5.
5.
Including you.
Thanks for that. In fact, as I reflect on the title, I just go back maybe 15 years when we started Emeritus. We started off as an offline venture in terms of offering professional education. Along the way, we got feedback from the investors, rightly so, in terms of for us to be able to scale the impact and growth, we have to look at online. And that's when we pivoted or added online to our portfolio. Now, come to 2024, we have very exciting companies in terms of having offline as a core part of that strategy. And hopefully in the next 30-odd minutes, we will try to unwrap that and try to learn in terms of what are the opportunities as challenges as companies look offline as their core strategy. Maybe amongst the panelists, I think Pratham from Masters Union has a slightly different go-to-market. You started off as an offline play. Now, just wanted to first start with you in terms of what made you consider offline as your go-to-market, and more importantly, it has been business education is an incumbent-heavy market. You have over 3,000 institutions with 4 lakh+ graduates. So how did you create your niche or the opportunity?
So I come from an offline background because my parents co-founded the lovely professional university. Some of you might have heard of it. And I literally grew up watching them build the campus. And what I learned from their experience is that in India, currently, there are at least 25 physical campuses that make revenues more than 1,000 crores. And almost all of them, at least the ones that are well-run, make EBITDA margins of upwards of 50%. Right? So for me, starting with offline just made financial sense. That's number one. And number two, it was also sort of my own experience as a student. So when I was in college, I met my first girlfriend in college. I met my first customer for my startup back then in college. My first investor was a professor, right? And I really feel that I changed my orbit in college because of the fact that was a physical offline experience, right? And so when I wanted to start up in education, that was the only background I had, right? With LPU and with my own college experience, I thought it makes a lot more sense to go offline. At least for me, that's where my muscle is. And secondly, how we created our niche in this crowded market. I think in India, education market, cannot be crowded, right? There is just that much demand for good quality education, right? So if you have a good quality product, you'll always have more demand than you can ever supply, right? Yeah. So we are just 3 years old, and even today we are seeing almost like applications in the thousands for the 200 or so seats that we have, right? Yeah. And so I think if you have a good product in India, things will just fall into place for you.
Got it. Maybe switching gears to technical education or maybe players who have online first as a strategy, then move to offline. Anshuman, Mayank, and Imran. Maybe Anshuman, it could start with you in terms of with having established your presence with online. I think it's a pretty different switch in terms of turning that dominant logic into looking at something offline. How did you guys do at Scalar? And maybe Mayank, you can add after that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we cater to 2 different TGs, the way we look at it. One is the working professional segment, who are already earning, and there is a very large opportunity cost for them to go and do anything, which is offline. You basically have to leave your earning and then do anything offline. And we felt like maybe the right product for them, hence, is not doing a completely offline product. It could have some mix of community where people meet each other, and that way you have the right peer group. And that's why we started online. What we, however, realized was that if we have to go to the undergraduate segment, which was our second product, there is a I mean, there's a built-in behavior already of going offline to colleges, and there is, I mean, and people do it anyhow full-time. In that case, the right product for them actually happens to be offline. If we build anything online at that age group where they have a lot to learn from the diverse set of people that are around them, I think we'll be doing them injustice for doing anything which is purely online.
Got it.
So that was one reason. The other reason also is that we feel, I mean, we've taken an approach where we today do not rely on a university brand, but we are building our own brand. In a way, if we look at who are the educational institutes that have done that, I mean, they've been the MITs and the Stanfords of the world. If we have to do that, then we need to have a play where we produce extremely aspirational outcomes. We produce extremely aspirational products out of that place, and that happens. I mean, basically, we need to create the Stanford before we create the Stanford Online. So that was another reason to look at starting Scalar School of Technology, which is a purely offline play, but for the undergraduate segment.
Mayank?
So I think I just look at Chaitanya, the entire blended and online offline thing. So essentially, we'll break down education. There are three broad buckets, and because of which, sometimes we focus on one bucket versus the other two. There is this context of acquisition, and there's an online-offline play that one can play. There's a context of learning, where you can play an online-offline play and you teach something learning. And there's a context of outcomes, where you can play online-offline play. I think our approach at upGrad has been largely that leave aside the middle part, which is a learning bit, which we believe that online is the way it can scale up a lot more, without which standardization will always become a challenge, and how do you bring in that standardization. But on the first front of acquisition and the last front of outcomes, whether it is about having counseling pods or a small center, working with franchisee partner, channel partners, how can you reach out to an audience which is very different? I think my philosophy is that, again, in this room, there are two real estate owners that manage all the digital spends. And it's very difficult to negotiate with those real estate owners. Versus if you have million-plus real estate owners across India, you have some negotiation power and you can bring down the acquisition cost significantly. And one of the sort of big issue that we have in this country is cost of acquisition of customers, specifically when it comes to online education, etc. So having that presence definitely allows you to sort of take care of that cost structure, which is the acquisition part of it. And then on the outcome front, many a times we believe that it is just, I'll send you some jobs and you will apply to those jobs and you will find an outcome. But you do require a little bit of that physical presence for organizing interviews and getting job fairs and organizing these events. I mean, we had a job fair last weekend where about 150 learners walked in and 76 got a job. If I do it in online, out of 150, only 15 or 20 will get a job. But that outcome just sort of exponentially expands when it comes to an offline context. And therefore, for me, when you're looking at online, offline play, you have to just have a slight nuanced view of whether you're talking about teaching, whether you're talking about acquisition, or whether you're talking about outcomes. And all three, I think there's a play for both online, offline to exist and sort of build something at scale.
I think with the panelists here, it's maybe more on the content part or the delivery part, where a lot of you have might not have an offline play before, but you're doing it now, right? And what you mentioned is about the acquisition part and the outcome part, where there is also a lever that you could.
It's a massive lever. I think we are just underestimating the fact that in acquisition you can actually unlock a set of customers that will never search you on a search bar.
And maybe switching gears to the test prep per se, of course, there are a lot of incumbents, both offline as well as online, when Physics Wallah came in. And once you built a very successful franchise, so to say, or a play in online. So what made you look at Vidyapeeth, now the Gurukul, or the other initiatives that you had launched recently?
Right. So even Alak got the first success in the offline field only, right? I don't know how many people know, right? Because he started with a small coaching in Allahabad and he became very popular in that setup, right? And then he thought about the scale, what Mayank is mentioning here, right? But he can't achieve that kind of a scale with the offline setup. Then he came into YouTube and the rest of the history, right? So for us, coming into the offline was very strategic. Reason being, we teach 11th, 12th students, and they need more disciplined, more structured kind of, lesson or, classroom programs, all these things, right? So offline enables us to do that, right? Because for online, because we have different kind of models in the offline ecosystem. One is pure offline, right? Even that is enabled with lot of tech supply, right? Where lots of content, video is being pushed to the students through the mobile application. And then we have hybrid model that we call Pathshala, where we do primary teaching in the offline system through the online medium, where the other classrooms, teachers are coming through the screen. But the students are coming to the center because they want a structured kind of ecosystem, right? And then we have another kind of ecosystem where students primarily consume the content at their home. They come to the offline centers for doubt solving. So, different kind of students have different kind of needs, right? And combining both the worlds of online and offline, it enables us to offer the entire set of things, right? And then we come up with the Institute of Innovation, that is a kind of offline setup of skilling, right? Where idea was, set up a long-term skilling offline program where students can come after class 12 and they stay there for 3-4 years and they can get good amount of experience. I'll tell you one example about that, right? So for this Institute of Innovation, I was just going through the LinkedIn profile of a student. So what they have mentioned, in their academics, they have mentioned they are studying from some online degree from any institution, right? But in experience, what they have mentioned, they are doing this, they are getting this experience in Institute of Innovation. So this offline setup enables the experience for skilling domain, right? And then we recently came up with the PW Gurukulam, which is kind of schooling ecosystem, and we started the first school in Gurgaon, right? And again, the idea was to go into the student's life cycle as early as possible. Because what we realized, at times 11th, 12th becomes too late for us. So the idea was just to ensure the requirement of each and every student and deliver according to that.
Got it. So you're talking about attracting different learner segments for the test prep. You spoke about how this could, the acquisition cost could be much lower, and also you spoke about the experience in terms of going through this route. So building on that, Pratham, one challenge that's with looking at offline in terms of the format of the delivery is the constraint of scale. So there's only, as we talk of education, maybe we should also talk about the impact that it could deliver. The challenge, as you contrast with online, is that the constraint of scale or growth could be limited with an offline setup. And thereby, as a corollary, the investment community would say the valuation would also be limited. So what's your take on that in terms of the scale versus the format?
I mean, so if you look at the revenue of the top 10 business schools in the US, right? So let's say Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, Yale, Stern, Sloan, INSEAD, LBS, Northwestern, Chicago, INSEAD and LBS as well. The average revenue would be somewhere in the vicinity of $400 to $500 million, right? And if you look at Ohio State, if you look at UPenn, if you look at Princeton, all of these have revenues in the billions, right? Penn has $6 billion in revenue, right? Not including the hospital. Including the hospital, I think it's 12 billion, right? So I think traditional universities which operate in an offline segment, I think these are all scaled up numbers. LPU, Amity, Sharda, VIT, SRM, all of them in India, they teach 40, 50,000 students on their campuses. And on top of that, online, that's separate, right? But still 80, 90% of the revenue comes from offline. And these are all scaled up businesses in of themselves, right? So I feel like when we say that offline universities cannot scale, I think that to me doesn't make sense. I think they are scaled up. If you look at the top 10 EdTech companies globally, I'm sure their revenues will not match up to the revenues that these universities offline ones have. Yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe time is another factor we should consider, across which time frame that they've built it also, right? Maybe especially with Scalar or upGrad and even PW, you have an online business, right, where the delivery is happening online as a format, and then you have the offline. So are there any unique challenges with offline that you don't face it online or vice versa, and how are you addressing that?
I mean, I'll tell you things from experience. Yes, there are unique challenges which are around logistics, food, etc., etc. Food being the major challenge in any offline setup. So those are there, but we do feel, at least what we see is that the engagement surface area per student in an offline setup is much, much higher. The attendance number, the adherence numbers are much better. In a way, engaging them in innovation labs, getting them to do things outside of the curriculum. There again, like, you have much larger surface area with them. In a way, the attribution of their success to you that is also much stronger there.
Affinity, you mean?
Affinity, yeah. So tomorrow, if I mean, for example, if you graduate from a UCLA, then you keep wearing your UCLA t-shirt and hoodies everywhere. I'm not sure if people keep wearing their Scalar t-shirts everywhere, as of now, for their online program. So, I mean, while there are challenges, there are a bunch of other good things as well for offline.
Good. What about you, upGrad? At upGrad, I think you really built a large online business. Then I think you started the...
So when we, I think, yeah, so one of the topics that we call the word EdTech, which it's a pet peeve for me, because I think all of us at the end of the day are education, and then technology plays a role. I'll just give you 2 points, Chaitanya. So one of the things that I realized, and this is reading up a lot about universities, again, these are partly anecdotal, partly sort of legend, urban legend, that some of the first universities that were built were jails. So to prevent youth from committing crime, plunder, etc., you will send them to these places so that they can learn something and come out of it. First set of universities were built completely on the outskirts. I mean, even when the kings have lots of money, they will still send the kids to a jungle to study and learn from there. I mean, all the best of the universities were built on the outskirts of the city campuses because there's no way that you can have fun and you have to just remain there. So a big problem in education that tech has been trying to solve, and sort of physical campuses do a much better job, is this concept of discipline. That if you are in a small classroom, it's very difficult for you to get out. If the teacher is teaching you, you will look into the eyes and you will nod to that particular person. In online, there's no blinker that you have built in, and therefore you have the WhatsApp, the Facebook, the emails and everything. And if you cannot put in that level of discipline, it gets very difficult for the retention of the knowledge to happen in the current context of online play. And therefore, what offline does really well is this concept of discipline. It just brings in discipline at one shot, and you can see that everybody's focused there, they cannot get out of it. Online, if you ask me what is the biggest problem that EdTechs have to solve, is discipline and nothing else. But on the flip side, the consistency of delivery, what I think we heard here, is obviously difficult and challenging because once you move offline, you can do that at 1 location, 5 locations, 10 locations, and it gets very sort of people dependent. And you have to write the right code of conduct to ensure that the consistency comes in. But I think that one piece of discipline is where offline just wins hands over. The last one that I'll mention, that current context of education and the tech-enabled education, is that there's a lot of mis-selling that happens. And this is a problem of the ecosystem. But when you do it offline, the chance of mis-selling comes down significantly. And I'll tell you why. This was a very interesting thing that we learned. If somebody's selling somebody face-to-face and talking in a center, they know that if they mis-sold, tomorrow they will come to the center. And you will be there at the center.
So it's more faceless is what
it's more, when you view the person, the attritions are lower because people don't leave. The person believes that they have sold them something, that they will always do the right job and not do the mis-selling, etc., which happens a lot more in the online context. I think those are the benefits that offline delivers of discipline and less of mis-selling, less of attrition, and therefore long-term play. But on the flip side, I think consistency of experience is one of the big problem statements that one has to solve for.
In fact, just relating to it, we did this test wherein we had an online program on the same subject, which was offered in class. This is nothing to do with an undergrad or a postgrad. It's a professional education program. So the learning outcomes, of course, it's not the same learners, but it's diverse enough to say that on online, the effectiveness was much more than what we found it offline. Right. So again, the point there is that how do you have the guardrails and engagement so that it can
It's
prosper?
a very important point that you mentioned, because in online, the person who can make it in online has 10 times more sort of persistence and motivation to finish it.
Yeah.
The person in offline will finish it much easier.
Yeah.
So if you have to get a lot of people throughput in the right sort of way, offline just does a better job. But in that 100 people, 10 people who finish online will be at a different level of persistency, consistency, and motivation level that in offline will find it difficult. But what offline, the 4 walls do is that does the job.
Yeah,
that does the job much better.
Maybe on that note, at Physics Wallah, did you see a difference in success metric or people acing the exams for an online student, somebody learning online versus offline?
It depends again, right? What Mayank mentioned, right? But for online, students need to be little motivated, little disciplined. Then, they can grab the best of that world, right? And there's, a little contradiction. We think that online is the thing which can reach to every part of the country, right? And again, at the same time, we feel that most of the students require the offline setup. Because most of the students are not that disciplined, not that motivated, right? So again, what we feel in the early years, more of offline setup is required. Once they progress in their career, more of online system can work.
Got it. Maybe
I'll add one more thing. So sometimes people say that online education is like Netflix and chill. You can watch a good Game of Thrones, you can watch good House of Cards, but you cannot Netflix and chill with Python 101 or Economics 101. Yeah. But if you are put in a classroom and you play Python 101, they cannot get out of the classroom. So they have to watch Python 101.
So you're forcing discipline in some sense.
So that education is forced discipline. Yeah. In some way, and I'm just one small example, and I'm sorry, I'm just taking some time, that I decided to run the marathon, and I said, I'll run it. I had to watch YouTube, this, that, etc. But then I got a coach who will wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and run with me. And if I did not have that, I would not have that motivation and discipline to finish it off. That did help me a lot in sort of pushing it through. I'm not sort of exaggerating, the discipline is the very critical part. I think in online education, a lot of us have cracked the mode of discipline and sort of bringing in that nudges, etc., between human and non-human factor, but that plays a very important role in finishing it off in a large way.
We could relate to that when we look at the MOOCs in terms of their completion rates, which is one proxy versus the courses that we run, which ranges around 85 to 90% versus 5% at MOOCs. You see that, of course, you provide the guardrails, you provide the engagement, still there is a good motivation.
Actually, just one more thing which I just like to add there. I also feel that the online education is today not at the maturity level where it should be. Offline is because it's been there for centuries. For example, one of the things, or one of the opportunities that at least at Scalar we do see, and I'm sure like everybody in education sees today with the changing AI, one opportunity that we have is, if you again look at, you were taking example of how kings would educate, right? Like kings would have a dedicated coach for their kids to be trained. I mean, in a way, aristocratic education was where you would get a one-on-one attention because you had a person walking with you all the time. That doesn't scale. Not everybody can get that. I mean, and like the role of tech is to make sure it can scale to everybody. And one thing with whatever is going on in AI is that there is an opportunity to start building a model where you know so much about an individual that you can create sort of a personal coach for them who is telling them what to do at what time, or who's curating the assignments in a way which would actually make sense to you because I understand the pace at which you learn. Yeah. And I feel like today, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world are not well positioned to build that. I mean, the panel probably sitting here is well positioned to build that because you have so much rich data about people learning with you that you can then invest on building those. In fact, it has to be human assisted in the beginning. But as you build it more and more, as you have individual attention, it is possible in, let's say, 10 years, 20 years from now, online starts outperforming offline because of the level of detail of attention that you have on every individual. Yeah. Today, online is not mature. And with an immature product, yes, there is going to be some level of fall-off happening.
Maybe just switching gears in terms of looking ahead, one challenge that higher education sector, especially operating in India, is a question or an elephant in the room is that is regulation an enabler or not so much, right? For whichever work or the initiative that you are running, maybe we'll start with Pratham.
Yeah. It depends on who's in the room. No, I think there are currently around 18 government bodies that control or govern or accredit some parts of education, right? So from NIRF to NABARD to NAC to NBA to AICT to UGC, the state ministries have their own bodies, right? So 18 different ones that we have to report into, okay, as LPU. So when we were building Masters Union, we decided that, hey, we won't be able to truly disrupt education in an offline way if we have to abide by all of these rules. By the way, the rules are quite funny. Some of them also require the table to be of a certain height and the chair to be of a certain height and the room to be of a certain size. And there has to be a blackboard, cannot be a whiteboard. In the evening, there has to be this much of electricity consumption. In the morning, I mean, it's crazy, the kind of detailing, right? It basically shackles your hands at the back. So for us, we decided that we'd rather not give degrees. We'd rather not give degrees, but we'll stay away from the regulations as much as possible, right? I've seen my dad for 15, 20 years just fight regulations, and I see Atulji as well. I'm sure he has a lot of feedback on this. But while building Masters Union, I was very clear, let's be as away from the regulations. In India, there are certain bodies that are enablers. But I think we as participants also find ways to game the system so as to not make it an enabling force anymore, right? NIRF, NAC, I think many universities have figured out a way to crack them, right? And Sorry?
Or hack it.
Or hack them, yeah.
And maybe I think there is also scrutiny on coaching centers of late. So what is your take, Imran, with respect to the sector that you're
So
in?
anyway, we are very student-centric company, right? We focus a lot about the students' welfare, and that is the DNA in the PW, right? So government's regulation are more towards, students' welfare, right? For example, if they come up, because right now they don't have very clear guideline what they come up, it's a matter of a state are enforcing in their own way, right? So we don't have very, exorbitant fee, we don't, make tall claims, right? We don't do false advertisements, So if these things are regulated, it is good for the ecosystem, right?
Right.
So I think, in certain way, government shall regulate, but, that shall help the ecosystem.
Got it. Okay.
I actually have a different point of view than that.
Please.
I believe it should still be a capitalistic setup where the market dictates the forces. If you're actually adding a lot of value, it's okay if you're charging more. However, the job or the role of regulation is to build transparency. In a way, if I have complete transparency into who is enrolling in a particular institution and then what is happening with them, what has the track record been like, which I can trust. Today, a top 1 ranker is claimed by like 5 different coaching centers, while, not everybody had the same role to play. So if you have huge transparency, and that helps the consumer drive the decision, that is the role of regulation. In a way, best markets are like free flow. You provide value, and that's how you derive value from the consumer. It's value pricing.
Self-regulated. What about you?
No, not much to add, Chaitanya. Just one point that I believe that I'll call it regulation of some mainstream versus non-mainstream. I think one of the things that it bothers. It's not it's not something for, pro, against sort of regulation. Is that while a whole lot of us are working on, let's say, skilling and helping people move up in the job, move up in the career, whether it's in the form of non-degree, degree education, all of these are designed in some way or the other adding to the GER growth targets of the government. But none of what we do get into that. And I feel that that's a complete wasted opportunity, because there's enough that all of us are also doing that should get into the overall structure, because there's enough that we can do to build India as a talent capital for the world. And I think all of us are working in the same goal and same approach. So I don't see regulation as against or for, but I just feel that we are all working towards the same goal. And I think if we are solving for the same thing, there's a clear alignment. And I think if regulation in some way brings in that alignment or builds in structures and transparencies which gets that alignment right, we'll all work towards achieving a common goal rather than fighting against each other or believing that one is against the other. But if the goal is the same, then let's work together to make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an example. We are sitting in Haryana right now. And there's a fee regulation committee in Haryana that caps the fees that a college can charge for technical programs at, I believe, 94,000 rupees per semester, if I'm not wrong. I think it's similar to that. Now imagine Ashoka University with such high standards has to function in this sort of a fee regulatory system. It just doesn't work. You can't offer a top quality education. You can't try to become a top 10 global institution or a top 100 global institution with those kind of fee caps. Now that fee cap regulatory committee, that entire thing has been an argument for the last, I think, 5-6 years. It's the court stays had to be taken, all of those things. Now those are just regressive. And it's politically very popular to do something like that, right? You immediately rally up a lot of students towards your party.
Maybe just building on that, right? So maybe it also takes us to this debate about skill versus credential, right? Whether to have the degree or not. You mentioned earlier, and you also say that what does the market want in terms of maybe for a lot of students, getting the right job, which can commensurate to their skills, is important. So what is your take on that as we look ahead?
So at Masters Union, when we talk to recruiters, no recruiter has ever asked me, Pratham, is your college NAG accredited, NRF accredited, AICT approved, UGC approved or not? All they care about is, are your students good enough, right? How are they doing in your exams? Can I talk to them? Can I meet them? Can I interview them? Right? So I think recruiters are definitely 2-3 steps ahead. They care about the skills. They care about the quality of the applicant. They give 2 damns about whether the college is accredited, not accredited. I think that used to happen maybe 5-6 years ago. I have experienced that with some legacy companies, Accenture. I have experienced that, but not anymore. They've also changed. Right? This year we welcomed Accenture at Masters Union, and they recruited a bunch of kids. And they were the last wicket to fall, I think.
No, so I think they're actually, it's a very important, deep-rooted question, because I think skill and just skills in itself is very difficult to scale. unless skill has got certain sort of connotation. And I think the first job, what Pratham said, is very critical. But if you look at the line that is standing, there is the private sector job that is there. Then there are some older legacy companies, private sector, which are there standing behind them. Then there's a government job standing behind them. Then there's immigration standing behind them. Then there is sort of visa standing behind them. So that structure, degrees have done in such a deep-rooted way that they have gone to the last mile and then working with them. So if a skill is some way covering entire thing, there's no reason why people will chase degrees. But the fact is that degrees are designed in a thought process where it's doing a certain job, which is thought through for a very long time, for the last 400, 500 years, and therefore an immigration looks at degrees than skills. But I think because the bastion is very long, the line is very long, it will take a lot of time for people to fall over at the last mile. And therefore, I think in some way or other, that credentialing has to come in such a manner that, for example, I was talking to AWS team earlier, said if everybody in India takes a AWS cloud certification, but when they are looking at talent going abroad and going globally, there's no value to that AWS certification. But if you have a master's degree from an approved university, there's a value to that immigration. But that line is so much behind. So in some way, all what we are doing gets into that system. If there's an API, I think Academic Bank of Credit that has come up with NEP, if every work that we have done gets into that ABC and NEP approach, that you know that it is all stackable at some point of time. I'm sitting with a bank of input that I've taken, because tomorrow that last mile of immigration, visa, jobs, the government job, etc., looks at that. If something of that structure can be done, I think skills and degrees will crisscross and come together.
Isn't that more relevant for overseas education rather than within
No,
India?
even in India, for government jobs, it's difficult. I mean, if I have an AWS certified, it's difficult for you to get a government job today. I mean, but if you've done a BA, you can apply for a government job. I'm just saying, and I'm just exaggerating. I'm just exaggerating this point. But my point is, it's so deep-rooted that then society is the last one, which is sitting right at the end saying, okay, degrees hai ki nahi hai. So I think it's not just the first job. There's a huge line of people who are waiting to change, and I think it will take some time, but I think the process is in the right direction.
The undergrad degree you definitely need. I think the master's degree can be a certificate. The undergrad degree doesn't have a substitute yet.
Right. What did you see, Anshuman? I think you guys had done boot camps now with the School of Technology. You're also providing an alternate credential in some sense.
Yeah, because we can't do away with that. But like, look, our tagline right from day one has been skills over degrees. So I agree with Mayank wholly that yes, there's a long queue of things to be solved. But if you look at the need hierarchy of a human being, their need hierarchy is, hey, look, make me employable, make me earn well, so that I can live a good standard of life.
Right.
And today, people who could enable that, they care about skills. I mean, I don't care whether you have a degree from XYZ, but if you can't pass my interviews, if you can't do well on the job, I won't hire you. And ideally, they should be the same. Degrees should be equal to skills. But today, they are not. And hence, we've taken a bunch of these calls, which are probably, I mean, for example, none of our teachers are professors. In fact, we have a policy against professors. We get industry professionals to teach because professors get very theoretical. They can't, for some reason, they don't understand like what the industry needs, right? So some of the antithesis has happened because of the degree has somehow diverted so much from what is required in the industry. As if they were the same, then I would say, look,
maybe it's also contextual in terms of what you're teaching, etc.
Yeah, so in tech, I mean, especially in tech. I mean, look, I don't understand what's happening everywhere else. In tech, the degree and skills are in different tangents altogether.
Got it. Maybe the effort that all of you are doing in some ways to get it converged, right?
Exactly.
So
if degree was equal to skills, our tagline would make zero sense. So.
Maybe in the final 2 minutes, just some closing thoughts, Pratham, from you as you look forward and looking at in terms of reinforcing your offline strategy. So,
Anshuman, you said something interesting, which was that, the offline system has matured and the online system is yet to mature. I strongly disagree. I think offline system is not mature at all. I think we're still following that 100-year-old strategy that there'll be a 6-month term, 4 months classes होंगी, 2 महीने फिर exams होंगे, exam से एक दिन पहले सब पढ़ेंगे, एक दिन बाद सब भूल जाएंगे.
Let me correct. The offline system has had centuries to evolve. Online is just very, very recent, probably just a few.
But offline has not evolved. We are still teaching the same way. I think the Gurukul system was better, right? And then 1800s happened, and industrial revolution happened, and our system became this factory line of sorts. And our classrooms are incredibly boring. I mean, just like hand to heart, how many of you have slept in a class? Like, come on, I slept through most of my Penn classes, and this was like Wharton Business School and the top professors, but yet I slept through because it wasn't that exciting. So I think we need to really change our classroom, the way it operates, and whether it's done in an online way or an offline way, in a hybrid way, whatever it is, but we really need to change the way of this, someone who's an authority in the field speaking to someone who's not authority in the field, and them being tested on that transfer of information 3 months later or 4 months later.
We're talking about changing maybe the rules of engagement or the rules of the game. Just quickly, any closing comments? Yeah, Imran.
Yeah, I can't take the side of anything online, offline, because we are doing pretty well in both the sides,
Yeah.
right? But blended offering is required, right? Where, the mix of offline, online, that is needed, and especially what I mentioned earlier, for the early years, that is actually required.
Okay. You guys, anything to close out? Yeah.
No, I think we said it. So I think it is going to crisscross. There's going to be a lot of crisscrossing, whether it's online, offline, skills, degrees. I think all of them. See, because I just believe that at the end of the day, we are imparting education. And in some way, there are some goods of what's happening offline. There are some goods of what's happening online. And I think the panel spoke about both the goods and bads. But in some way, we have to just sort of leverage each other rather than seeing we are anti each other.
Yeah.
And I think together is when you will provide the right outcome that is needed for the country overall.
Good note. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, look, I'm very excited about, if you look at like last 50 years, a lot of the changes in how education is done has started to happen recently. I don't think EdTechs can take all the credit for that, but I mean, there is a lot of credit that can go to EdTechs on how people are thinking about education with first principles. Yeah. And I believe like one of the questions that you'd never asked, but I would have hoped you had asked was like, what is the future of EdTechs and education? And that is actually what excites me. The next decade is going to be extremely exciting for higher education.
The NIRF ranking 10 years from now would be in top 10, Scalar and Atlas and physics, hopefully.
Hopefully so, but yeah, on that note, we are almost out of time. But look, it's not a zero-sum game. Both are there to exist, coexist, and impact further. Thanks a lot for the wonderful panel, and thanks for the audience for listening in. Yeah, thank you.